ladies and gentlemen. So today I'm going to talk to you about Henry Ford and the assembly line. Now, the idea of Henry Ford and the assembly line, it's something that happened, over 100 years ago, but it really changed the Industrial Revolution. It sort of changed how everything is even created today. There were long-lasting impacts, and that's why we're going to spend some time talking about it. So, here we go. December 1st, 1913, Henry Ford, he creates the assembly line, and he does so for one specific reason. He wants to try to produce cars faster than they have been produced in the past. Now, in the early 1900s, cars were really toys for the rich. It was like kind of how, you would have an expensive Ferrari that you would only drive around the track, right? That's kind of how people would treat it. So nowadays, cars are everywhere, and so they're mass produced. But what Ford came up with was the idea of the assembly line. How can we build cars quickly and cheap so that average Americans can afford it? So he came up with this idea of dragging a chassis, the frame of a car. He came up with the idea of dragging a frame of a car down the entire length of his factory, and workers, one by one, would add all the different pieces for a car. And so essentially, as fast as possible, he would have a team of, hundreds of workers assemble this car. And he realized that this process is a lot faster than having a master craftsman try to assemble the entire car, which could take half a day, maybe a whole day, something like that. And so it would be considerably cheaper, and you could produce more cars using this process. Now, the thing is that Ford realized with the assembly line, the smaller the task, the more efficient it was going to be. So workers would put on a wheel, and then the next worker would tighten a lug nut, and then the next worker would tighten another lug nut, and then the next one another, and then the next worker would put on the steering wheel, and then the worker after him would tighten it, right? So it's sort of like the process was broken down in such extremely small sections that it became almost tedious or mindless for a lot of these workers. And so they had an issue sort of keeping their jobs because they were so bored at work. It was easy to become distracted or sort of zone out while you were working, which can cause mistakes. And so Henry Ford knew that this was a problem, and he wanted to keep people from quitting. He wanted to keep people from thinking that it's better to get a different job where at least you're using your brain. And so he paid workers $5 a day. Now that doesn't sound like a whole lot right now, but it turns out that back in the day, $5 a day was a lot of money. And so he was basically bribing his workers to, become loyal to the Ford company. He was saying, if you stay here, you're going to get paid well. You're going to actually be able to buy one of these cars. So it was all these, he had all these incentives to try to keep workers working for him. So the assembly line was crucial to bringing down the cost of the cars, but it was really, really important because it helped establish the idea of something called interchangeable parts. Now, interchangeable parts is an idea that you can use the same steering wheel on any car. You can use the same tires on any car. You can use the same pieces of equipment on any single piece of technology that's produced, right? So nowadays, if you think about a cell phone, right? If you drop your phone on the sidewalk and it cracks and suddenly the screen's broken, are you screwed? Well, not exactly, because what you can do is you could go to the mall and you could find a store that repairs cell phones. You could say, hey, I broke my screen and I want to replace it, and they will replace it. And the reason they're able to replace it is because each part of the cell phone is produced with interchangeable parts. Every single screen for an iPhone or every single screen for any phone is going to be mass produced, and so you can buy a replacement on Amazon, or you can buy it at a local cell phone repair shop. You can basically mix and match the pieces however you need to do so in order to have a working device. And so the same idea was true way back then in 1913 with the Model T. Every single piece would fit every single car. And because you had interchangeable parts, it would mean that everything was very easy to produce. You didn't need to, customize it. You didn't need to tailor it for every single car. And it sped up the process a ton. So the last thing I wanted to talk to you guys today about was the assembly line and what it looks like today. If you look at modern factories, there aren't people standing there putting in one bolt, tightening the lug nut, all that kind of stuff. It's now done by machines. So if you were to look at Ford or Hyundai or any of these major companies, machines are doing the majority of the work manufacturing their products. Humans definitely still have a role. They're typically there for quality control. They might make sure that the machines are functioning properly, but they're not usually working on the line as much. In some industries, particularly like food, you might have people still working on the line to check and see if something has gone rotten or if there's packaging that's been screwed up, that kind of stuff. But again, mostly it's for quality control. Hopefully now you guys understand why Henry Ford and the creation of the assembly line was able to make cars and all other products that are now produced that way a lot cheaper than they used to be, and how interchangeable parts was crucial to the industrialized world that we live in today. How it changed how everything is produced. All right. So if you have any questions, go ahead leave those in the comments below, and hope you learned something. See ya.